Hello and welcome. My name is Ruth Rumack. I am the Executive Director of Education and the founder of Ruth Rumack's Learning Space. We are an academic center where we work with students one-on-one, and we will get a little bit more into that in a moment. I'll tell you more about what we do as well. But welcome this evening to our Assistive Technology workshop. And I hope that of all of the things that we're going to share, we're going to share many, many things that we use in our own practice on a daily basis. My hope is that you will go away with at least one tool that may be interesting and useful to you or your children, that you can actually implement quickly and effectively. So that's my hope for the evening. My intention is to share with you as much information as we possibly can, and to share our knowledge so that we can continue to support the community in the best way possible. All right, let us begin. I introduced myself. I'm Ruth Rumack, that's me. And, we established a learning center over 20 years ago now. We've been doing this for a long time. And this is something that is, dear to my heart. I have a background in teaching. And when I started working, it was really one-on-one with students from my home. I recognized that there was a great need for a deeper understanding, particularly of learning challenges. And in doing the work that I was doing on my own, I realized I also needed to build a team in order to support the community better and to support the kids that we saw on a regular basis. So from one thing led to the other, and the practice left my home and into a bigger space. And now we have two beautiful spaces in Toronto, one downtown and one midtown. And we see many, many, many students, hundreds of students over the year, and support them in a one-on-one direct instruction way, where we're working with that one student, with one teacher. And I must say, I'm very proud of our team for their Herculean effort to move everything that we do in a dynamic and engaging way in person into an online format. And that happened really in a matter of just a few days. We were able to get all of our online materials and resources going. So our services are continuing. And tonight we're going to share with you some of our best practices regarding assistive technology. And I'm very excited to have Catherine with us. Catherine Scratch is one of our Associate Directors of Education. She's been with us for many years and has been really instrumental in bringing our assistive technology department together and testing out different apps and different programs, and really looking at the best practices for our general practice, not only for students with learning challenges, but also, they're universal. And we're going to talk about that now. Let's move on. So what is universal design and technology? This is the ability to have access, equal access, that everybody should have equal access to the different learning modalities and different ways of assessment and different ways of being assessed, and just basically being able to function and be productive in the bigger scope of things, whether that is in a personal sense or in the academic realm. Now, I like this poster because I'm always the little one. I'm the shortest. I've always been the shortest. So, there are many challenges that I face in terms of not being able to see over counters, or being, maybe I'm not that short anymore, but not being able to reach things on the top shelf. And this poster always makes me smile, because it's not about, giving somebody extra boxes to be able to be at the same level. It's really just about taking down that barrier altogether and being able to access the information in a universally acceptable and accessible way. Let's move on. We are talking about assistive technology. We call it AT. So what exactly is that? Well, it is really any technology that benefits somebody with a diagnosed learning challenge. It's anything that allows somebody to communicate and to support their work, to be able to show what they know. And when we talk about AT, or assistive technology, particularly in the school setting, it is really recommended for those students with particular challenges. However, as we know as educators, there is this idea of universal design, and these technologies really help everyone. And they are good for everyone, and they make learning more accessible and easier on a wider scope, not just for those students or individuals who have been diagnosed with something particular. And what we're seeing now is that there's much AT or assistive technology built into a whole bunch of things that we use on a regular basis. And when we talk about this accessibility, the ability to tap into the assistive technology, one really great example in Toronto is that the Toronto District School Board has a program or uses a program called Read and Write. And it was originally only available to students who had a diagnosis, but in the beautiful part of things and the way that we keep things open, that it is actually free to anyone who is part of the TDSB and has a TDSB email. So if you would like your children to use this technology, and we're going to show examples of it later on, and you're part of the TDSB or another school board that has the license, they've already purchased the license for Read and Write, you should have access to it as well. And if you don't know about it or how to find it, to get in touch with your teacher or principal, because it is there and open for everyone in the TDSB. All right, let's talk about the next thing. So early intervention is best. And, you know, when we're talking about students with particular learning challenges, the earlier we can train them and get them comfortable on this type of assistive technology, the better. It is not a replacement for learning a new skill. So, you know, my perspective is that a child who has, let's say, a reading challenge should not strictly be put on assistive technology or given the assistive technology in lieu of learning the skills that they need to read better. But it certainly works together, and it's about building a really strong foundation, and the assistive technology can help with that as well. So from my opinion, it's not one or the other. It's how do we use all of our abilities and all of the things that are out there for us to build the best foundation possible to give that child the chances to succeed in the best possible way. Next, Catherine's hitting the slides for me.
Oh, it's actually.
There you go. So how does assistive technology actually help a student? Well, it allows a student to access things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to access. It allows them to show their own potential in a way that they may not be able to show otherwise. For example, I'll give a quick anecdote that, you know, working with students for so many years, I've worked with many, many students who have very severe reading challenges, who are in grade 5, grade 6, grade 10, grade 12, who are reading significantly lower than their peer group or grade level. And a technology that allows, let's say, a screen reader so that what is on their screen can be read to them, or even using an online book or an audible book, these are things that can be absolute game changers for individuals. And I'm remembering a young girl who was with us for several years, and by the time she was in grade 5, she was probably reading at about a grade 2 or a grade 3 level. And at that point, she had made significant gains from the time that we met her, which was probably reading at a pre-kindergarten level. Well, in grade 5, very bright kid, very artistic, really articulate. The reading was a challenge for her. And what was happening was that it was affecting her self-esteem. She was not able to read the novels that her friends were reading. And in her classroom, you know, they were being able to talk about the novels that they were reading and have discussions about them. And she was feeling more and more isolated. So, you know, at first her parents were quite against assistive technology. They really wanted her to learn skills that she could use on her own. And we kept pushing for, could we just try, you know, let's try an experiment. Let's give her this book on, well, I always refer to it to a book on tape, but that's so 20 years ago. But an online version of the book where you could actually, or the screen reader, where you could see the words come up, she could watch the words come up, and then listen at the same time. It was the first novel that she was ever able to participate in her classroom. And the first day that she came back to us after reading the first chapter on her own, without a parent reading it to her, without a peer reading it to her, or without anybody else having to be there with her, she put her iPad on with her earphones on, and she was independent. It was a game changer. You should have seen her face light up when we saw her the next time, how excited she was that she could go back to class the next day and talk about all the characters and all the plot and all the pieces that happened and answer the questions in exactly the same way that everybody else in her class was doing it. So what this does is it levels the playing field and it allows a student to be able to participate in a way that they wouldn't otherwise be able to. And in some of these apps or programs, it's actually working on the skill, because if you are reading something with your eyes, even if you're not sounding the words out yourself, and hearing the words, there is a lot of research that suggests that that actually does increase fluency over time as well. So there's a lot of research behind each of these technologies and how they can be helpful for students. And I think the most important part is just the confidence and being able to participate in a way that everybody else is. All right, let's move on.
All right.
I'm going to hand it over to Catherine, and she's going to take it from here, but we'll both be around for questions at the end. And I didn't mention that if you do have questions, to please put them in the chat box at the bottom, and we will be checking that chat box periodically so that we can field questions as we go, but we will definitely leave time at the end to have your questions answered as well. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you. All right, I should also mention that it's not chat in a webinar, it's the Q&A box. So that's okay. But feel free to leave any questions that you might have, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go. All right, so Ruth did a really good job of introducing text-to-speech technology, because it is probably the thing that we think about the most when we think about AT for students with print-based LDs, and it is incredibly helpful. But I think it's important to remember that it is really helpful for so many students, and it's really everywhere. And I think that the biggest takeaway is that assistive technology is really part of it's really pervasive. It's part of our lives on the daily, regardless of our abilities. And so I think that a lot of the stigma that may have existed 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, have dissipated, which is fantastic. So text-to-speech, incredibly helpful. We have, these are some of our favorites in terms of the umbrella. So you can access text-to-speech through applications, programs, built-ins, web-based extensions, you name it. And what really changes between the programs is how they show the text. So I'm going to show our favorite text-to-speech program, which is Read and Write for Google Chrome. So just bear with me here. And just to give everybody, a good understanding of of what we're talking about. So the Read and Write extension is just a little puzzle piece right there. There are different ways that you can use text-to-speech, but this is one of the easiest ways. You simply highlight and press play.
Our certified and highly trained learning specialists use direct instruction pedagogy, Orton-Gillingham principles, and multisensory activities to help students achieve and surpass their grade-level reading skills.
Great. So I do also want to point out that you can change the voice. So that was US English Samantha, but I actually prefer UK Serena. And if you needed to slow down the text, you can do that as well. We do this all the time for our students who need a little bit more time when they're processing, and we find that it's really helpful. And I'll just show you what that looks like as well.
Our certified and highly trained learning specialists use direct instruction pedagogy, Orton-Gillingham principles, and multisensory activities to help students achieve and surpass their grade-level reading skills. This highly effective.
Great. So the technology has come quite a ways from where it used to be. It is now not so robotic, and it's very customizable for the student. So part of the reason that we love Read and Write is because it's very simple to use. You noticed how it was a simply click of a button. Everything is in the options for changing the pace, changing the voice, the accent, and whatnot. So that is the text-to-speech that we use all the time. I also want to mention that they use a yellow and blue highlighting to highlight the text as it reads, which has been shown to keep attention for students as they're following along. And the yellow and blue is specific for people with dyslexia. So that is why, even if yellow and blue doesn't appeal to your senses, that's why it was chosen. It is research-based. And it does really, really help. I find for my students with focus attention issues or any type of text-based or print-based learning disability, it really does help, especially with the comprehension piece. And as Ruth mentioned, it gives them a sense of independence and they can feel really good about themselves. So there are obviously other built-ins that you may be aware of. So your iPad has those capabilities, your phones, and they are everywhere. But what's most important, I think, is the highlighting. And so some of the built-ins do not include the highlighting as they go. They simply just read the page. And that to me is much less effective than the slow highlighting as it reads. That is what helps the student to take in new vocabulary, keep their focus, you name it. All right, so I want to talk about audiobooks as well, because we love audiobooks. As Ruth already mentioned, we often recommend audiobooks for our students, particularly because we want reading to be enjoyable. And for a lot of our students, it's not enjoyable because it is challenging and it is hard for them. So using an audiobook can help alleviate that stress and the anxiety that surrounds reading. When it is some of our high school students who are reading audiobooks in order to write about them, we always recommend that they read with a physical copy. So, listen to the audiobook while following along with a physical copy, because as you may know, obviously there's a lot of annotation that you might need to do or quote finding. And so I've had a lot of success with my students using that strategy. In fact, one of my favorite anecdotes is I've worked with a student for so many years, and when she was in grade, I want to say 6 or 7, she was reading an audiobook and following along with the text in her hand. And when we had our next lesson, she was like, I had no idea what italics meant, but I found out. So all these years she had been reading italics and never known that it meant emphasis. So she was missing so many of these subtle clues. And then when she heard it read out loud while following along, it was like a light bulb moment. And what was the most amazing part of that was not only her enthusiasm to tell me, but then she started using italics in all of her creative writing to show emphasis. So it's just those little things that, that kind of like unlock those little secrets for our students. So there's lots of different ways that you can access audiobooks. These are just a few, but the Toronto Public Library has an amazing collection of both ebooks and audiobooks. You can access them through the Libby app or Overdrive. And the Libby app actually is used for all sorts of libraries, not just Toronto Public Library, but it's a very easy, simple to use app. And I do also want to mention that if you don't have a Toronto Public Library card right now, they have opened up, they've made it easier for you to get a library card due to COVID-19. So you can just do it online, which is pretty amazing.
Can I interrupt you, Catherine, for one moment? Because there is a question in our chat room, or question and answer. And I'm going to share it. And Catherine, maybe you can speak to it before we move on, because it's about read and write. So somebody says, I've noticed read and write doesn't work on Google Classroom. Do you know of any programs that are compatible with Google Classroom?
I have used it on Google Classroom. Which part of Google Classroom would it not work on? Uh-oh.
We'll wait for the answer to that if you want to share some more details, and we can also come back to it and talk about it later.
Sure. Okay, that's interesting. I will also be brewing on that. Thank you. Okay, there's also Sela, Bookshare, and Arrow, which are just a little trickier to access because they do require a couple little registration steps, but they do exist, and they're these wonderful publicly funded resources, and they have all sorts of things, not just audiobooks, but tons of ebooks and other resources for anyone with a diagnosed learning disability. Then there's also Audible, and Audible put up a lot of their audiobooks for free, access for free. You still have to create an account, but that's pretty amazing. And I've found a lot of success with Audible because it isn't very much per month, and students generally keep taking out different books as they go, which is a nice like little hook. And there's also Story Nori, which is for a bit younger kids, but it has a ton of really nice illustrations on the website, and a ton of fables and fairy tales and other classic children's literature. And then there's also Lit2Go, which has quite a good collection of the classics, maybe for older students. And it has audiobooks as well as all the PDFs and bibliographic information, which is quite handy for high school students that need to cite their sources. All right. Ruth, was there more in the chat?
Not yet. So
okay.
We'll come back to it later.
Okay. Just feel free to interrupt me, please. All right. So our next technology that we're going to talk about is dictation. And so dictation is one of those technologies that, like, so many years ago, I think when I first started at Ruth Rumex, which, you know, seems like a lifetime ago, and I mean that in the best way possible. It used to be, you know, one of these things where you had to like load up a big old program, you had to put on the headset, and you know, you had to train Dragon, and which is a software that is still fantastic, but you know, it was cumbersome and took a little bit of time to set up. And now dictation is everywhere. I think a lot of people feel very, very comfortable picking up their phone and writing texts by speaking, and so this dictation is so important for a lot of the students that we see, and the fact that the stigma is gone is wonderful. And we use it so often here because one of the things that one of the aspects of the way that we structure our learning is that we separate written expression from handwriting. So just because a student is learning dictation or using dictation doesn't mean that we stop teaching them how to stop working on those fine motor skills and stop working on handwriting. Obviously, we're still remediating that. And we're still making progress, but dictation can help with confidence and independence and all of those things that work so well in tandem. And so we've had such amazing success stories from dictation. And our first anecdote, I didn't want it to just be a story. We had to put it in some slides. So the visual is very impactful. So this was actually an assessment that Ruth did quite a few years ago. And the student was in grade 5. And as you can see, his written output was it was clearly very challenging for him. He didn't write a lot. You can barely read what he says. I think it says something along the lines of, the question, first of all, is if children ruled the world, how would it change? And he wrote, the world would end, Satan, economy is collapsing, I think, war, more war, and then a sentence that I can't make out, and money worth nothing. So all fantastic ideas, maybe a bit dark, but great ideas about what would happen if children ruled the world. But again, all these brilliant ideas, you can't really make out. So Ruth asked him to type the answer to the same prompt. And he wrote, if children ruled the world, then a dictatorship would happen immediately. People tricked into handing over their inheritance. Kids would be killing kids, drug addicts, the apocalypse would happen. Don't let kids rule the world. So this is a huge improvement from the written, from his written output. But just check out what happens when she asked him to dictate the same paragraph. All of a sudden it's this big long paragraph, which I will now read because I think it's amazing. If children ruled the world, a dictatorship would happen immediately, and if not immediately, very soon. Most kids would be tricked into handing over their inheritance to older kids. Kids would most likely resort to killing each other and maybe even cannibalism. Some kids would likely find drugs and then start to abuse them. The apocalypse could happen. In brackets, my version of the apocalypse is a desert wasteland with not enough food or water. So don't let kids rule the world. So just by dictating, you can see his knowledge of even a sentence. Like he has capitals, he has periods. He had to put in those periods. He knew when he wanted to add these things. He was able to show his ideas in a way that he was limited before. This is a very wonderful example of why we love dictation so very much. So the Dictation Umbrella, there are so many ways that you can access dictation. Dragon, naturally speaking, is a huge, it is the, quintessential program. It's the one that it's very well loved and used. And to be honest, I still love Dragon, and I think it has a really wonderful place in the world, in that it can very easily control your entire computer without you having to use your hands. So if you have any type of challenge in terms of using a computer and only can use your voice, it's a fantastic program. But if you just need it, if you just need dictation for expressing your thoughts, getting out an email, writing a paragraph, writing an essay, you don't necessarily need Dragon. It's a very sophisticated program and it can do all sorts of wonderful things. But we have found that Google Voice Typing, which happens to be free with Google Chrome, has been getting so much better that we rarely use Dragon at the center. And then obviously there are tons of built-ins. Microsoft Dictation has also really improved over the last few years, and Mac Dictation is actually based on Dragon, naturally speaking. So it also is quite good. All right, so Google Voice Typing, we have a very short video just to give an example of what that sounds like.
Another great option for dictation without needing to purchase software is Google's voice typing. It's less sophisticated than Dragon and needs the internet to work, but it's completely free and provides an excellent resource for students. To use voice typing, you simply need to be in a Google Doc. If you have the Read and Write Chrome extension, you can access voice typing by clicking on the Speech Input button, found here. If you don't have Read and Write, you can find voice typing in the Tools menu, under Voice Typing. With either option, as soon as you click, you will see a big microphone button appear on the left side of your page. The great thing about voice typing is that there's no setup at all. You can begin dictating right away. Voice typing is a great tool because it lets me use my voice to type, period. There are many commands that Google suggests voice typing can perform, but we've had varying success using these. The more accurate and most used commands are things like comma, period, and new line. Give it a try and see how it works for you.
All right. Thank you for posting some things down here in the chat, because apparently I can't see the Q&A as I'm as I'm sharing my screen. So I see that there's one question about programs that are available on the iPad. So our favorite program, Read and Write, you might already know, only has the word prediction keyboard for the iPad. The iPad has some really wonderful the built-ins for Mac OS, for the iOS are pretty good. We really like them. We use them with our students who are primarily using their iPad. And in the handout that you will receive at the end of this presentation, I have listed how to access those programs. So there's the speak screen and text select that work pretty well. They do highlight, and they're pretty easy to use and set up. All right. There's also a question about typing. She cannot read fluently or write. Do we teach her to type? I think she is too young for QWERTY, use voice or type or both. We have tons of students that while they are, the gist of the question is, do we teach her to type or dictate or both? And I think it's both. We generally try to do those things in tandem because, as I said, just like the handwriting, as you're working on one thing, like typing is a skill that takes a lot of practice. And then while you're working on that skill, you can also still be working on written expression using dictation.
I'm going to jump in on that one too, if I can, because we've had many students at various ages. So usually the research says that it's about grade 3 that you should be starting to teach proper typing skills. So our QWERTY lessons start at grade 3. However, even in the grade 3, grade 4, even sometimes to grade 5, students have smaller hands. Their muscle control may not be great at the beginning, but you want to be modeling proper habits from the beginning if you can. So for students who are younger than grade 3, I think that combination of doing some voice typing so they can get their ideas out, and then they go back to the screen and they edit what they've written. They can use the read back function so that they can hear what they've written to make sure that it's what they wanted to say. So for us, it's really layering all of these different modalities and different pieces together so that we're not just focusing on one and forgetting about the other, but it's strengthening all at the same time. And I'm reminded of a student who was working with us maybe transitioning from grade 6 to grade 7. She was totally verbal, had amazing ideas, so much to say, and she could talk up a blue streak. So voice typing for her was really helpful, but then when she had her ideas there, she would go back to it, and then we worked on editing and what sentence structure was and those pieces so that she was actually building the skills while she was learning to type. 2 years later, when, at the beginning of grade 6, she was only using the voice typing. 2 years later, as she had built up her typing skills, she was then transitioned and she wasn't really using the voice typing at all. So she had, learned the grammar and learned the sentence structure skills alongside of how to get her ideas out in the most efficient way. And then she chose what was working for her. Sometimes she used voice typing, but more than not, she used the typing when she was comfortable with it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ruth. All right. So the next technology that I want to chat about is word prediction. And I do want to differentiate between the word prediction that is on our phones that we use all the time and the word prediction softwares or apps that are usually paid. So when we when we're typing texts and we get the suggestions at the top, that's still technically word prediction technology. However, that technology is based on the first 3 letters of what you've typed. So the other word prediction technologies that are out there that we use are phonics based. So that means that they're looking for the sounds that are recognizable in the letters that exist, rather than the actual first 3 letters of the word. And I do want to do a really quick example because it's one of my favorite things to show students as well. And I just have a blank document here. So we use the word prediction for read and write as well. And the tool is right here. It's a little magic ball. And so if I ask a student to spell psychology that doesn't know how to, that maybe is missing some of those pieces, it's kind of a tricky word to spell. they might sound it out by saying call, and then they're like, oh, I've seen ology before, so they might say that. And then you can see
Sonology, cocology, psychology.
Yes, that was the one, and then they can click on that word.
Program.
So it's pretty great in that it can find those phonics that students are usually leaning on when they're spelling words that they're unfamiliar with. For younger kids, this is a really nice tool to have. And for older kids, usually what ends up happening is they try to spell it. If they totally botch the spelling of the word and Google can't help them, when they're using Google Docs or Microsoft Word can't help them, the spell check, then they tend just to go straight to dictation. So many of my students are not sure about how to spell a word, so then they just click the microphone and they say the word psychology, and then they see how it's spelled. So it's really nice because it also helps with seeing those spelling patterns, and that has been proven to also increase spelling and vocabulary. So that's word prediction in a nutshell. Another program that we do use here, and you may be familiar with it because the TDSB tends to use it as well, is WordQ. It's actually a Toronto-based company, and usually it's paired with its sister SpeakQ. But it's great. It's a software that is downloaded and follows you around into any document. And again, it predicts phonetically, and it also provides synonyms. So this is just a really quick little video that's pretty cute about WordQ.
Everyone has moments where they can't quite find the right word for the situation, and that's where WordQ can help. WordQ is a simple and efficient program that combines word prediction and text-to-speech functionality that can help you easily find the word you're looking for. WordQ adapts to learn which words you like to use, and even allows you to modify which vocabularies or topics you wish to use. Furthermore, WordQ isn't limited to just English. It can also use French, Spanish, and German to help you finish your essays, emails, or anything else you're working on.
Thank you, WordQ. So I will mention that the big difference between WordQ and the read and write word prediction is that read and write, you have to click from the list. So it can slow you down because you have to go from typing to your mouse. With WordQ, you can just hit the number of the word that you want. And also WordQ learns the words that you're using more often. So it is actually learning about you, whereas read and write's word prediction tool is not doing that. It's kind of garnering information about everyone that's using read and write in order to use that prediction. Okay, so that's, I think, all I had to say about word prediction. Pre-writing tools. Okay, so pre-writing is something that we really prioritize here at RuthRoomX. We spend a lot of time in the brainstorming part of the writing process because it's often the part that gets ignored. So we spend a lot of time teaching students how to best brainstorm because it helps them to really get the bigger ideas, really push their thoughts further, and it allows them to better organize their ideas before they start writing. So we use two programs primarily. We love Inspiration, and so this is what Inspiration looks like. You can create these really beautiful mind maps. You can include pictures that you take. They have tons of clip art. You can import from other places. It's a really wonderful iPad app that we use all the time. We use it all the time here at the center when before COVID-19. And because the iPad, it's so tactile, and it's only about, I think, $13 on the App Store. Unfortunately, they do not provide an app for other tablets, so it's really just an iOS situation. But this is what's most fantastic about it, is that it very quickly and easily goes from the mind map view to an outline view. So then for my older students, usually what we do when we're brainstorming is we fill out these bubbles a lot more with longer sentences. And then by the time we go to the outline, all we need to do is copy and paste and put that into, and export that to a Word doc, which is amazing because then all of the hard work that you put into your mind map pays off in the writing stage, because you're essentially done the writing stage, and then you can move on to the revision and editing stages. So we love inspiration, and its fatal flaw is that it does not have an online collaboration tool. You can access inspiration online, but you can't collaborate. So we use Mindomo, which is very similar, has a very similar interface, and it is web-based, meaning that both the teacher and the student can be collaborating together in the same document, and it also has an outline view, which is very helpful for our students. Okay.
We have a question, which is what grades use inspiration?
Oh.
And also there's a previous question about things that are specific for the iPad that would be useful because somebody's got an iPad to use. So I think we've talked a little bit about that, but as we talk further, the more we can kind of streamline to iPad opportunities or options, that would be good too. So what grades use inspiration, Catherine?
Well, inspiration actually has Kidspiration as well. So the company has two separate programs. I mean, I've used inspiration itself down to grade 2 because it's so simple to use, and we just use dictation, and really all it is a couple clicks on the screen and then you just go. It's very, very intuitive. It's nice because when you're teaching paragraphs to kids in grades 2 and grade 3, you know, they're just starting out. So it's nice for them to be able to manipulate. It's nice for it to be very color coded. And so I've had a lot of success. We've all had a lot of success with using it with really young kids. And then as for its flexibility, I've used it with students in grade 12 for helping them brainstorm before they start their essay, so that they can like chunk ideas and put things in different corners, or just say like, oh, maybe I can't incorporate this idea, and then they just delete it or put it somewhere else. So it's very, very versatile, which is part of the reason why we love it so much. And then in terms of iPad stuff, we will be coming to more iPad stuff with research tools and note-taking. So there is some more iPad specific ideas. Okay, so research tools and note-taking. So research is one of those really tricky skills to teach. And we find that, you know, sometimes students come to us and they just say like, I'm not sure what I need to do, I just need to research. And they don't know where to begin, and they also need help organizing all that information. So we love the read and write. Can you tell that we love read and write?
And we are not getting sponsored by them, I'm afraid.
Although maybe I should email them. Okay, so we love the highlighting tool. It's really fantastic. So this is just a really quick screenshot, but I do want to show everybody because I think it's worth seeing. So essentially, you got 4 different highlighters, and you can break them down into different ideas. So I'm not going to read this entire article, but let's say you wanted to highlight a little piece of information in yellow, maybe like descriptive words, or this is kind of an interesting article about teddy bears on porches. But anyway, and then you could have the ideas that you're highlighting in different colors, which is pretty handy. And so when you're done reading through the article, you can after you've done all your highlighting, you simply click Collect Highlights. You have to sort the highlights by either color or position on the page. And then it creates a Google Doc, and it's going to just load that up right now. But what I love the most about it is that it provides the URL. So many of my high school students are like, oh, I got this really great piece of information, but I have no idea where it came from. And when they use the highlighting tools, they cannot lose it because it's right there in a Google Doc for them, which is pretty handy. And younger kids really love this as well because it's very helpful to structure the ideas. So if you were finding ideas about the description words about the house in the story or about characters in the story, you could use different colors to differentiate between those things. So we use it a lot here, and it can be tailored towards different age groups very easily. All right, so Notability is an iPad app as well as only for Mac. So as someone who uses both Mac and Windows devices, it's a bit sad, but one day they'll change. Notability is a really wonderful digital binder. Essentially, it's really great for high school students, university students, but we have had a lot of students in the middle school use it as well because it's so easy to use. So this is kind of this is a big example of what like a university student might do, because you can annotate right on the text. I was helping a university student. You can with her lecture notes, and so you can upload the slideshows that the professors post before the lesson, and then as the lecture continues, you can add to it, and you can annotate, and you can take your own notes. You can write with a stylus on the screen of your iPad, or you can just write in text boxes, and then you can also record very easily using your device, which is really fantastic. And then you can go back and listen to your notes, and you can see where you made those notes. So it kind of plays it back to you in real time, which is quite nice. So a lot of students really like Notability. It's very easy to use and really clear and straightforward. We've also had a lot of students use Livescribe, which is a pen that also has the recording feature, so it has some similarities with Notability. Livescribe has specific proprietary paper that you take your notes on, and it is and so you could have either your phone or an iPad connected, or a tablet connected with the Livescribe pen. So as you're writing on the paper, it shows up on your device. It automatically translates that into text that then can be very easily searched. But again, this type of tool does require really great fine motor skills. So, it depends on the type of student and what they're needing it for. But the playback feature is very handy, because then if you ever miss something, you can just put a star next to it, and you can play that back from when you lost track of your professor or lost track of your teacher. So it's a really nice tool. Also for our high school students, it's a bit iffy. It's not iffy, but making the works cited work easier for students is incredibly helpful. And I love personally teaching students how to actually create their bibliographic information. But these tools are really, really helpful as well. So these are just two examples of Chrome extensions. I'm a Chrome user, so these were the extensions that I've used before and I can speak to. And essentially what they do is they just follow you around as extensions wherever you go. And then if you want to see the bibliographic information of the article that you've just read or of the website that you've just read, it'll just pull it up. And all you need to do is click on the extension and identify which reference style you would like it to provide you with. And then you copy and paste and you put it into your Works Cited, and it's fantastic. So I use these tools to make my students' lives easier while also teaching them how to do it by hand if these tools fail them. Because every once in a while, the tool will say, like, couldn't find this information. So I like to show them how to find that information for themselves. So it's not just blindly copying and pasting, which I think is best practice. Okay, and how's this for time management? Now we talk about time management tools and executive functioning technology. So we know that for a lot of our students, the anxiety and procrastination go hand in hand. And we work with so many students who delay and procrastinate and avoid. And so we are constantly trying to find things that work for them. There are built-ins. I've actually been very happy with looking at the digital well-being, or the name escapes me for Apple, but on everybody's phones in settings, you can actually look at your usage of every single app that you've been in, and you can limit things, and you can say at certain times, I don't want to be using it. And I do have all of that information in the handout that you will receive as to how to access those in both an Apple phone and an Android. And so even just being aware of like the time sucks or the distractions, I think is a really important first step for a lot of our students and for ourselves. But these are two other really great programs that we have used to varying degrees of success with our students. So Stay Focused is a really great extension. You can essentially say, you identify the websites that are big time wasters for you, and you can say, I only want to spend 15 minutes on YouTube for the whole day. So you give yourself a time limit, and then as soon as you get to that time limit, you are blocked and it's inaccessible for the rest of the day, which is fantastic. However, it has to come from within. So for all of our students, the biggest hurdle is that it can't be an external motivator. It has to be internal. So the student needs to feel like they want to make a change. And often that takes a lot of some types of finessing or a little bit of coaxing and a lot of conversations about being a little bit more aware of how they operate. But that has been very helpful for even myself to stay focused. Forest, I believe, is part of the same, I think it's the same parent company, but Forest is more of the positive reinforcement, but it's the same idea. So you tell Forest that you have an amount of time that you don't want to be distracted, and you make a list of good websites that you can be on and a list of bad websites that are no good. And then the longer that you are on those good websites, the bigger your forest is. And so at the end, you can check on your forest and you can see all the different trees that you've planted, the virtual trees that you've planted by staying on track, which is kind of a nice incentive. And it's cheesy, but it does tend to get, it does tend to make you feel good when you see how many trees you've planted. Then there's the trusty timer, the timers. And so the time timer is this one that you see in the bottom here. And there are a ton of these that you can download on any device. And we tend to use them here so that students can see and they can visualize how much time they have to complete an activity and how much time is left. Because for a lot of our students, particularly with focus and attention challenges, like, who knows what 10 minutes feels like? And so that can be really tricky if you just say like 10 minutes to do X, Y, or Z. Time is very relative. So the timer helps to visualize it, and it's a great app. Most of, like, all of them are free, and because it's a very simple program. And so we do use that with our students as well. And then there's the Watchminder watch, which I haven't gotten my hands on, but it sounds like it's really cool. this really cool technology where it's just, I believe it's only around $50, so it's very accessible. And it was designed with people with ADHD in mind, so that they can set reminders to come to them at regular intervals just through a vibration. So you get a little buzz on your wrist to remind you, like, you need to pay attention, or you need to hand in this thing, or whatever it is, which is really handy because so many of my students with focus and attention issues aren't allowed their phones to remind them during school. I suppose that's not an entirely big issue while we're all working from home, but it is when you're in the classroom. So I think the Watchminder could be really helpful for a lot of students. All right.
I want to jump in before you go on. I want to say that the time timer actually comes in a physical form as well. So it's not just an online downloadable piece. It is also an actual physical clock. And while Catherine is talking about the next thing, I might go and find mine so you can see what it actually looks like. And I use it at home. It's been amazing to help my daughter sort of focus in on time and really understand what is 5 minutes. And if I only have 5 minutes to clean my room before we leave the house, then this is how much time, and you can actually see the red changing into white, and then you see visually what's left. So I know from other parents that it's been a real game changer for morning routines and helping kids get out the door faster, which is always a help.
Indeed. All right, so just lastly, actually this is our last slide, we made it. We're gonna just chat very quickly about some math tools. This is absolutely my favorite program. ModMath was created by a father and son duo because the son has dysgraphia, meaning that he can't show his work very neatly or clearly, and so he was really struggling in school because his teachers kept not being able to understand him. And so they designed this app. It doesn't have any calculating capabilities in it at all, so it has to all come from the user. But it's really nice. The grids and colors are very nicely laid out. And I've used it with a grade 6 student who essentially had dysgraphia, and he went from not being able to hand in his work or complete his homework just because it was so messy, and he would just have these scribbles all over the page, and he kept making all these mistakes because he couldn't keep everything in line, to every time that his teacher gave him questions for homework, he opened up ModMath. I should mention that ModMath is an iPad app as well, but he would open up ModMath and he would use a stylus to put these numbers in, and then he can just export it as a PDF to his teacher. And so his teacher was just getting emailed his homework, and then his mom would print it off for him, which was amazing. And it was this huge game changer where his teacher could see his work all of a sudden. And he was like a very bright student, and his only challenge was that he just couldn't write it down. So for him, it was night and day between what he could do before and then what he could do after with this program. So that was like the best thing in the world to be part of. And then there's also Equatio, which is very incredibly helpful. It's part of the same family as Read and Write, and you can use dictation or handwriting to write math in a Google Doc, or their own proprietary math workspace. It's all online. Equatio is free. ModMath is, I think, around $10. And both are incredibly helpful for students who need to show their math digitally. And as we are working more and more online, it happens to be that people are using these tools more and more as well. All right, so just the last couple of slides here. These are some of our offerings that we have coming up. We do have an AT, just want to highlight this over here because I helped develop it. An AT training, kind of like a boot camp that we are running in this summer. It will probably be online. And these are some of our other group classes that are currently being offered online. And Ruth, is there anything that, yeah, I imagine there are questions or?
There are a few questions. First of all, thank you, Catherine, for all of that information. It's like, I'm sure for our listeners, it's so much to take in because there is just so much that the assistive technology can do. We will be recording this, so it will be available in a few days. We'll send it out. So if you have the time to go back or you wanted some more information, either look back at the recording or feel free to reach out to us. We are here to answer your questions both right now and some question that comes up in the middle of the night and you don't have us at that moment at your fingertips. So you can always reach out to us through our website, www.ruthrumac.com, and we would be happy to answer any questions. So there were still a few questions that came up on the chat or the Q&A. Let me just go to that now. The one question is, does mind map work on a MacBook? Yes. Or does a type of mind map work on a MacBook?
Yes. So both so Mindomo is web-based, so it works on any device because it just is accessed online, and Inspiration is only available for Mac. So if you have a MacBook, you can download the software, or if you have an iPad, you can download the app. So,
okay. Yeah. There's another question, which is about assistive technology training. And could we do it now? Because the summer may be too far away. So I don't know where we're at in terms of scheduling, but that's definitely something that we can talk about. And if you would like to reach out to us, we can certainly talk about perhaps even putting what we call a bring your own group together, which is if you have, I think our minimum is 3 kids. Don't quote me on that, but if you have 3 or more students that would be interested, we can do a group class, and we can do it at the schedule that works best for you. And if it's less than 3, or if it's, let's say, just one person individually, we can certainly do that on a one-on-one situation. And this person has actually said, anyone online interested now? And yay, you know what? I love this. I love this chat. This is so cool. So let's get the ball rolling, and we'll see if we can put a class together sooner. Another question is any typing or keyboarding programs that we recommend?
So we use Typing Agent, and we really love Typing Agent. Depending on the age range of the student, there are tons of options out there. There's also Keyboarding Without Tears, is really nice for younger students, but it really kind of depends on students' age and ability.
I would agree. I would also say that depending on the dexterity of your child, also using a smaller keyboard. So sometimes using, let's say, a Chromebook, which has a smaller frame, is helpful, and also using potentially an iPad or a tablet attached to, are they Bluetooth keyboards, Catherine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that they're much smaller. They're like this big, and they will attach or they will connect with Bluetooth capability, and then the keyboard is much smaller for smaller fingers as well. Mm-hmm. So there is a couple more questions. We keep talking about grade 3 being discussed as the right time to introduce assistance, not assistance overall. The grade 3 is really, let me clarify, what research says is the best time to introduce typing skills. But the other assistive technology can be used at any time, I believe. And we've used it with kids as young as kindergarten. So if you have a student, let's say, who is practicing sentence construction and they don't know how to spell everything, or they don't have the dexterity to write it themselves or the confidence to write it themselves, if you use your dictation device and they dictate their story and then they see it come up on the screen and then you use a read back function to read their words back to them, oh my gosh, it's just like you have opened up a whole new world for those kids. So I would say that grade 1 is definitely not too early to be using read and write. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that also kids in grade 1 everyone in grade 1 is really just learning to read and write. So if they are struggling, it may just be the rest of their peers are as well. But obviously, any tools that can engage and bring up those skills are great. Yeah.
And add confidence too.
Mm-hmm.
The other question is typing agent free?
No, it's not. And I'm not entirely sure how much it costs. But I can get back to you on that.
You can check on that. Yeah, definitely. But and the other ones that are online, I mean, there are some free ones, I think, BBC Dance Mat typing, which was popular several years ago. I think that there are things that are more engaging and more relevant now, but it is a good one. It's under BBC, like the British Broadcasting Corporation. Dance Mat, I think is what it's called. Is that right, Catherine?
That's correct. Yeah.
I defer to Catherine.
And it's pretty fun. I like it. It's pretty cute.
Good. Oh, we've got some other questions. Does Equatio work for trigonometry and calculus?
Yes, it does. It does. They have all up until university math.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Keep them coming. I love this. This is so awesome. Okay, here's another one. Are there any technologies that help high school students to break down a task through this new online learning that schools are providing? So I'm going to start with that one because I think, wow, for kids who have attention and focus or any kind of executive functioning challenges, this can be a very difficult time. On one hand, you know, their time is kind of their own during the day, so they have more flexibility in being able to come and go and dive in or not when they're ready. But at the same time, having, let's say you're a high school student and you have 8 courses to be responsible for, and you are not seeing your teacher on a daily basis, you may not even see them on screen more than once a week or once every 2 weeks for some of the students I've been talking with. So it can be very challenging to keep track of stuff. I would say that looking at an online type calendar, and we use a technique that we call working backwards. So we look at subject by subject and we have a conversation, and this is maybe something that a parent needs to sit down and do with their kids at first to model how it works, but you just start at the top of your schedule. So let's talk about your English class. Okay, tell me everything that's going on in your English class. Let's do a little detective work. So let's go to the emails that your teacher has sent you, and we're going to write down just under English all of the things that are due, perhaps make a checklist, write in the due dates, perhaps take that information and put it on a bigger calendar like a Google Calendar, maybe something online, or even just a handwritten calendar. And you go subject by subject by subject, and within each subject you break it down even further so that they can see, you know, what they need to do first priority and then later priorities, so that we're not getting caught up in the small stuff and forgetting about the big thing that's due in 2 weeks from now. What else can we suggest?
I mean, the unfortunate part is that the kind of the answer is no. There's no technology that I'm aware of that helps high school students break down the tasks for them. And it has been, for all of my students, very challenging to do that. But what I have been doing is creating like a week at a glance, like the old school week at a glance. And that tends to help them break it down. And then they can see, if you were in school, these would be the tasks that your teacher would be doing, giving you daily, rather than in a chunk at one time. We also, when we work one-on-one with students, we tend to talk about the to-do date, like the date that they will actually do it, and then the due date. And so when Ruth was talking about that homework tracker, that's usually how we break it down. And then that helps them to kind of think about the planning piece. So I wish that there was a magical technology that could do that, but it just takes time. And it's actually really good practice for the future, but it does require some effort, a lot of effort.
I would add to that the modeling of it and the practice is the most important piece, and the consistency. So when we see students on a weekly basis or twice a week basis, we're touching in with those kids in a very regular way, and we're using the same techniques over and over again. so that over time, sometimes for some kids, they catch on to it and they pick it up quickly. Others are a little more resistant or they need more practice with it, and therefore it takes longer. But over a period of time, we find that, you know, for a student who was coming in at the beginning, kind of sitting at the table with their bag closed, you know, arms crossed, waiting for us to pull it all out of them, within a period of time, they now know to come. As soon as they come, they've already got their agendas open or their notebook open, or they've opened up their Google Classroom, so that they're already kind of getting into the groove of it. And even though they still may need some assistance to pull out the information and sort it, at least they understand what the strategy is and what the structure is. And then we're helping them to fill in the pieces as they go along. So there is no, as you said, Catherine, there's no magic app that will do that for you. You still have to plug it in, you know, manually to some degree, but it's something that is a skill that will develop over time. And the more you practice it, the stronger it gets. Okay, we've got a couple more questions here. One of them is about poor enunciation, and that when using that with a text, a speech to text or dictation software, that it's causing frustration. Let me say, if poor enunciation causes read and write dictation to often get words wrong and cause the child frustration, would you say it is too early to use the program? On one hand, it forces better enunciation, but on the other hand, there is actually more frustration than if I write the words he is saying.
Yeah, so usually with students with have poor enunciation, the dictation will be very frustrating. And so when I've taught it to younger students before, it's really important to have that headset with the microphone, because it does tend to help just that other little step. But really, I do the rule of three, which is if you try it 3 times, if you try saying the same word 3 times and it still can't hear you properly, we take a break, take a deep breath, and then we just try a different way. So then we just try typing the word. We find the workaround, because you're right. If you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, it will, it's super frustrating. So on that hand, on that note, I think it really is kid dependent on how young they can be to use dictation. And you can kind of feel that out as they go, and how successful they are. Because dictation does require, you know, a knowledge of sentence structure enough to know to put a period and to say period. So I hope that answers that question.
It's partly trial and error also, right? And sometimes the computer will hear a certain word in a certain way repeatedly, and then if you do take a break and come back to it, you know, refreshed, sometimes it's easier. And then again, just multitask in terms of different modalities. But I would say perhaps, and you're right, that on one hand, slowing down, and the student I was mentioning earlier spoke a mile a minute, but she was able to kind of slow herself down and actually kind of help herself think more logically or more strategically as she was forced to dictate, because it allowed her to think about things before she wrote them down, which in turn sped up her editing process, because she just wasn't saying everything on her mind. She was actually thinking about it more categorically.
Can I just say that I love Trello? So to Paula, I love Trello so much, and there was so much that we wanted to have in the presentation that we couldn't.
So can you tell us a little bit about Trello, Catherine?
Well, Paula's done a really good job of describing it, so I will just read what Paula wrote and then agree. How about that? Okay. For everybody. So Trello is a program for organization, and Paula says it was recommended by her daughter's teacher last year, and it works really well and allows you to color code, click and drag from one to complete, and you can make all your different categories. So it's based on the principle of people used to do this with sticky notes. So it's based on that like old board meeting idea, which I think is called the Trello board. I don't know. I've never been in a board meeting. But anyway, and so you're just moving the task along. but it's digital and you can change it to be whatever categories you want, which is amazing. So actually before the birth of my child 2 years ago, my partner and I, we created a Trello board for all of the things that we wanted to do before he came. And so that, some things were like just like fun things and other things were like tasks around the house. And it was really helpful. And I have quite a few students that are using Trello right now. And what they love about it is that it is so customizable. Like you can choose however your brain operates and organizes, you can set that up. So it's a really great one.
Excellent. We have another question. Are there any apps to build vocabulary comprehension for a child with language delay in grade 3?
So I would recommend RAS Kids, which isn't necessarily an assistive technology in and of itself, but it's a really fantastic reading program, and I believe they have it available for free until June right now, but it is a subscription service, and it's based on reading level, and you read books, but you can also have them read to you. And so that's all within, you can do it online, it's accessible online, or it's accessible, you can get the app for either your tablet or your iPad. But we really love RAS Kids because you can choose the reading level, and then maybe not hundreds, but maybe like 30 different books will come up. Then you can choose based on interest, and it's very simple to use. And I think for kids, they also get stars. Is it still stars, Ruth?
I think so, yep. There's an incentive. There's an incentive
for how much you read, and then you can build things. So I would recommend RAS Kids for building vocabulary and comprehension.
I would say also that in RAS Kids you can do the leveled books, but you can also do the phonetic steps of books as well. So it's not one, you can use both. So it's both for decodable books, like sound easier to sound out, or you can do it by levels.
All right.
Which has higher vocabulary than the decodable book.
That's true.
There are a few more questions. Is there a way to add unique words to Google Speak?
Not that I know.
Not that I know either.
So the Google voice typing is taking, that is a big drawback, because with Dragon, you could add a unique word that you're going to use a lot into your vocabulary list, and then it would always recognize what word you were saying. But with Google voice typing, because it's gathering information from everyone in order to get better, it doesn't have that customizable feature. So if you did want to add unique words, you'd probably be looking at Dragon to do that.
And I find also that Dragon is sometimes better once you have trained it. And again, you have to train your Dragon. You have to practice the same words and then correct it if it's incorrect and load those in. But I find for accents, individuals with accents, or sometimes with speech challenges, that is an easier way to go. It's frustrating at the beginning because you do have to work hard at making it recognize you. But once you have recognized it, and if you say those same words consistently each time, then it will recognize. I mean, Dragon has a whole suite of medical jargon, and there's a medical dragon, there's a law dragon. So there are very highly specialized words that have been included in these particular streams or programs.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question about, have we heard of Bitsboard and any insight that we have? It's an iPad app.
I have not used Bitsboard. Is it a whiteboard?
I don't know. We'll have to find out. We'll wait on that one. And somebody else had a question about a group of 3 for specific classes. How many sessions would we have as a minimum?
So the class that was created is, sorry, Ruth, I'm just going to jump in. The class that was created is a 10-hour class. So
10 sessions, probably.
10 sessions, 2 hours a day.
So, no, but that's our math coming in. So we probably do, it's a 10-hour class. So whether it's 2 hours at a time or only 1 hour at a time, it still would be 10 hours worth And we spread that out, or you can do it as a chunk as well.
That's correct.
Yeah, 2 hours a day. So we have an answer. It's not a whiteboard. It's an app to learn about various something.
I think
Topics. Thank you. Various topics.
okay.
You know what? Not familiar with it, but we're going to check into it. We'll see what we can find.
Thank you. I'm always looking for new ones.
You know what? This is the most incredible thing as we've made this transition from in-person lessons to online lessons. Our teachers have been incredible at finding different ways of making things accessible and interesting. And we have, part of our charm as a learning space is the interaction and the engagement that we bring about to our lessons, and the dynamic lessons that we give, and how kinesthetic they are, and how much movement is involved in movement and learning. But I'm so pleased to say that as we've made the transition, our teachers have found ways of sharing a whiteboard and then using interactive games to be playing together, creating our own games to back up the skill that we're working on. Even something as small as practicing a new reading sound, like the TH sound, for example. We've created now dozens of games and activities that we can do online. So the technology that is out there now, we're lucky that we are at home in this digital age, in that we can really access so many of these incredible things. And now with the assistive technology, I'm hoping that what we've shared with you tonight will allow you to go and practice some of these things with your kids, or for yourself, to see what what it's all about and how you can use it. We have a couple of other questions. Are there any good pre-writing tools for students that don't like mind maps?
So usually what I do when someone doesn't like a mind map, because sometimes it's visually too cluttered. Definitely that one was pretty busy that I showed you. And often we make them much more simplistic. We just wanted to show it off. But usually what we do is we just create an outline, like very, very simplistic. You can actually just start in the outline view in Inspiration to create it. Or we use a lot of templates. So using the template structure is how we generally write an essay. So we would do that for paragraphs as well.
We have another question. Have we used Flipgrid for student presentations?
I haven't, but I hear it's pretty cool, but I don't know very much about it. We generally, a lot of our students are just still love Google Slides, and there are tons of add-ons that you can also purchase to make them more customizable, that my students have been getting into. So that's what we've been doing.
Excellent. I would also, there's another question about good math learning programs like Prodigy. And I know one of the names, is it Academics, that some of our teachers have been using? I think that's what it's called, Academics. But let me check on that one. Anything else that you can think of, Catherine?
Oh, on the top of my head right now, of course, I feel I have nothing in there. But we do use Prodigy a lot, because it's a big hit with kids. I'm thinking like Math Museum. There's Sushi Monster, which is so simple and such a blast. It's by Scholastic, so I think it just has really nice colors, and you can practice addition and multiplication. And of course, I can't think of any more right now, but those are a couple.
Yeah, I just checked it. It is Academics, Arcademics. You can write it in. I'll write it in the chat. But it's basically arcade games and academics, and their math is one of the areas that you can look under as well. All right, let's see if we've got any other questions. You guys are so amazing at sending good questions. Okay, let's see. I think, okay, here's one. somebody has said to learn typing, it's helpful to just let him practice by typing a paragraph or two and to focus on punctuation, or there is a particular benefit to typing, or is there a particular benefit to typing programs? What do you think, Catherine?
I think there is a huge benefit to typing programs because it teaches the proper muscle memory. And I think, I don't know, I think maybe the scientific evidence is a little bit like still coming in on that. But, you know, learning the proper technique really helps to be able to not have to look at the keys. And so many students, they get by just by one finger typing, the find and peck method. And it's crazy how much slower it is. So even if you're still doing, like you can get really fast at the find and peck, but you'll never be as fast as if you just learn to type the proper way or the, you know, the traditional way. So that's why we, that's why we've created the program so that the muscle memory gets in. And I think that's, yeah.
I think there's also something to be said, and this is my philosophy as an educator and what we've built our programs on, is the idea of structured, systematic practice. And with a typing program, you are learning one skill at a time, you're mastering that skill, and then you're moving on to the next skill. So the idea is to build a very strong foundation, and then you build from one skill to the next, and as you progress and as you have mastered that level, then you are able to go on. You know, in terms of typing programs, what I find is, you know, when our grade 3s and 4s come in and do the QWERTY program, they are not going to leave with proficiency in typing. They're not going to just sit down and suddenly be typing 90 words a minute. But what we're doing is sort of setting the stage for good habits and for efficiency later on. So if we can set a model of good habits to begin with, then, you know, it's sort of it's paying it forward in some way, in that you're putting in the time and effort now, and you're going to keep practicing, and then over time you're going to really thank yourself for putting in that time and effort. What else? And anybody else have any questions? I don't think so. I think this is good. Well, I just thank you, Catherine, for sharing everything. Thank you, all of our viewers, for joining us. And we will stay online if you have any further questions. But if not, if there's anything you want to know that comes up, as I said, in the middle of the night, send us an email. You can send it to info@ruthrumack.com, RUTHRUMACK. And we look forward to hearing from you. We also, I'm going to put a plug in on Tuesday nights. I am hosting a parent question and answer, which is basically we'll choose a topic for the evening. It's not as formal as this webinar, but what I'm hoping to do is just open it up to the community to be able to ask questions and support each other. It was specifically designed for our stay-at-home learning. I called it, what did I call it? Learning, at-home learning 101, you know, for parents who are struggling or have questions, or for people who are doing really well and they want to share what they're doing at home. So Tuesdays from 7 to 8, and you do have to pre-register so we can send you the Zoom link, and you can do that on our website under workshops, I believe. So look for parent Q&A, and it would be lovely to have you back and to continue the conversation. So if we don't have any other questions, I think we're good. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thanks, everybody. We'll stay on for a couple of minutes and see if we've got any other questions.
All right. Thanks, Ruth.
We've got a question about good programs that can be used to improve student spelling, not just their writing. What do we use to improve spelling?
I'm sorry, I got distracted because one of my old students said hi in the chat. So sorry about that.
I love it. I love it.
Improving student spelling. I mean, the word prediction does seem to help in terms of teaching and kind of highlighting where, you know, that the correct spelling of the word. We kind of specialize in spelling, so we do we work through a lot of sound and spelling rules, and so we systematically kind of go through that. We use a ton of different apps. It's kind of a big question, but we have used Spelling City.
But that's what I was about to say. Spelling City seems to be very popular.
Yeah, and so it's an app, but I believe it's also web-based, and you can customize lists. So if a student was working on a spelling list from the teacher, you can input that, and then they play games with those words. So that's a nice one.
But you would have to input the words that you want to work on. It's not necessarily a structured program that's going to take you from, you know, ground zero and up. You have to manually decide what words you want to practice. But it is a good platform if you have a set of words to plug it in and then practice that.
That's right. All right, and Lisa's asking, yes, I'm going to email the handout probably first thing tomorrow morning. It's my plan.
Excellent. So what we'll do is send out a handout with all the information that we've been talking about. And we welcome your feedback also. So if you've got some suggestions, or if you want to give us some feedback on the presentation itself so we can make it better for next time, that would be wonderful.
Great.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much and have a lovely evening. Take care.
Thanks again, Ruth.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Catherine.
Okay, bye.